I wanted to talk a little bit about the process of meditation. We all know that the Buddha left clear instructions for meditation practice in his teachings. The Satipatthana Sutta, the scripture on the foundations of mindfulness, gives very clear instruction. And for each of the foundations, lists upon lists of the core Dharma teachings, many of which we're familiar with, the Four Noble Truths, the Five Hindrances, 7 Factors of Awakening. But there are lots of instructions. But in the sutta that records the Buddha's last teachings, Gil Fronsdal notes that the Buddha summarizes what he discovered with his awakening and what he taught during his 45 years as a teacher. And significantly, he does not recount a set of doctrines or a belief system, but rather gives a list of practices and spiritual qualities that grow with a spiritual life. So by teaching practices instead of truths, the Buddha offered methods to help us uncover our potential for peaceful, compassionate, and liberated lives. So this Buddhist practice is concerned with discovering what's truest for each of us in our own hearts and bodies, rather than what traditions, scriptures, or teachers may tell us is true. And I find that a very interesting, compelling part of these practices. So to some extent, we're all called to take responsibility for our practice in every part of our lives, on the cushion, off the cushion. And with all of these instructions, one would think that it would be easy. We'd just need to go to chapter 1 and follow the instructions, and then we'd be mindful. And then chapter 2 would get us through the wisdom and the compassion teachings, and quickly we'd know what we're doing. But the teachings make it clear that we can't just become awakened by reading or listening to teachers. We're expected to try on the teachings and see how they apply in our own lives. Are they helpful and wholesome to our awakening? And if not, we have the agency to let them go. The Buddha did not expect people to follow his teachings blindly. He taught that the teachings should be followed based on a practitioner's own understanding. In the Kalama Sutta, he said, "It's right for you to doubt. Doubt has arisen in you about dubious matters. Come, Kalamas, do not rely on oral tradition or on the lineage of teachers or on holy scriptures or on abstract logic. Do not place blind trust in impressive personalities or in venerated gurus, but examine the issue for yourselves. When you know for yourselves that something is unwholesome and harmful, then you should reject it. And when you know for yourselves that something is wholesome and beneficial, then you should accept it and put it into practice." So hence that term, ehipassiko, come see for yourself. And that's what we're invited to do when we practice. So what are we to make of all these options that are available to us? From the Buddha's guidance to all of the modern teachers. We can be flooded with best-selling Dharma books or the freely available teachings online. We can listen to a podcast in the morning and decide that we need to focus our attention on an anchor to get rid of those distracting thoughts. And then we go to noon meditation and decide that meta's the thing. We always have to do metta. That's better. And then we go to a Dharma talk that night and we're hearing about how it's really important to develop deeper concentration. Or perhaps we're experimenting with loving kindness or self-compassion or open awareness or mantras and chanting. And the thing is, all of these methods have their time and place, and all may be needed at some point in our practice. But it can feel overwhelming to figure out when and how. At least I've found it so at times. And then sometimes we think we have it all figured out, right? We have the best meditation. And we say, oh, I'm going to do that for the next 30 days. And I will grow so much because this really worked for me. And then the next time you sit down, causes and conditions have changed and you're a different person and it isn't what's needed. So confusion can set in if we choose from a potpourri of practices without any clarity about when and why. The Vipassana teacher, Winnie Nazarko, suggests that it's helpful to know what set of instructions am I working with in my practice. Now, Pat Coffey, in his talk last month, talked about the importance of keeping in mind the larger map of the world of practice to give us some sense of where we are situated and where we're headed. And then last week, Matt Fritz was really helpful in pulling out the teachings from Lama Tashi, such as the benefits of setting a wholesome and altruistic intention for practice, and perhaps bookending it with the dedication of merit. I mean, these are good tips and good structures to follow to decide what's needed. If we want to be able to guide our own practice and not just lurch from one practice to another, we need to think about how we're cultivating our practice. How are we growing it? How do we know what's needed here? It can be helpful to regularly do some self-reflection and sort of a check-in on our practice. Gil Fronsdal, who I always find very practical and helpful, has a list of key questions to evaluate your meditation practice. I think they're pretty great. Here's some of them. We can ask ourselves, what's my motivation, my intention for meditation practice? Am I here for awakening and spiritual growth? Am I here for relaxation? What's my intention? That really affects how we might want to proceed and cultivate our practice. Then there's understanding yourself. What book or teacher or instruction is a good fit for me? Thinking about it. They're not all the right thing for everybody. How does this meditation practice interact with my daily life? How am I actually living this practice? Or is it something I do when I sit and don't think about till I sit again? Can I take it into my life? And we can ask, what are my obstacles in meditation practice? Are there some recurring things, habitual patterns that come up all the time? Maybe it's obsessive thinking or desire or boredom, excessive striving. What are my obstacles? And then we can ask how much self is involved in the practice and see if we can let go of some of the self-image and self-judgment, that sense of my practice, I mean mine. And we can ask, how do I create sense of this? Are there certain insights or wisdom teachings that are calling to me? Is it super helpful for me to look into the nature of clinging and grasping, or to cultivate the beautiful states of mind like compassion, loving kindness? And finally, what benefits am I seeing from my practice? Because with patience, we may actually develop more ease, more compassion, self-understanding, freedom. And it's great to check in every now and then to see, what's changed? Am I benefiting from this? So with this kind of self-reflection, we can take some responsibility for intentionally cultivating our practice, instead of just going with the flow or listening to the guidance of others. And I want to ask us to take a few minutes to sit back and do a reflection on a few of these questions. I'm going to ask us, and Brianna's going to help, to get into some small groups. You always have the option of not participating. You can remain and meditate if you'd like. But I'm going to ask people to get in groups of 3 or 4, whatever works with our numbers. And Brianna will do the same on Zoom. And we're going to spend about 2 minutes each responding to a few questions that I'll share with you. And then for about 12 minutes total, just a couple of minutes each, and then we'll just talk together about what we've heard. And to answer these questions, or if there's one that particularly you're interested in, go for it. Is there an intention or a motivation for practice that I've been working with lately? What's my motivation? What set of instructions am I working with? You might think of it as, do I have a go-to practice these days? Like I'm really loving metta practice, or I'm really, loving focusing on my breath as the anchor, whatever it might be. What's my go-to practice these days? And finally, am I noticing any benefits from my practice? What might those be? So take a minute to think about your intentions, your motivations, your go-to practice, any benefits. And don't worry about rehearsing. See what comes out when you open your mouth. We're not striving to be the best meditators here. We're just trying to look at, what do I do? And I will tell you, I tried answering these questions a little earlier today and really struggled with one of them. So just give it some thought. All right, we ready to go, Brianna? Okay. All right, so Zoom groups, if you're willing, go ahead and accept to go into your group. Please self-time, so you'll have 12 minutes total. Think about sharing 2 minutes each first, and then spending some time talking together, and we'll be back in 12 minutes. Let's just take a moment to maybe harvest any wisdom in the room or on the Zoom lines. I wonder if there's anyone who would like to share any insights that came up or any questions that came up as you talked with your small group. Maybe y'all can give me a heads up if somebody raises their hand. I don't know if I can sum this up, but just an overall intention to find how to be present. Judy, what was yours?
I said that it was kind of like self-care, and not being kind to myself, a time to be intentionally kind to myself, and not kind of that spacing out mindless, like watching bad TV or something, but like an intentional, like self-care.
Right, and just being comfortable in my skin, and kind of differentiated. Acceptance of me and others differently. Just okay. Any other just quick?
I guess my intention is just attempting to be present in the moment, and not always like looking ahead to the next thing and over planning and everything. Just really trying to use it as a present moment.
I would say ditto to the above, but also I find it difficult to choose. It's like, I'm grateful that there's so many methods, and I need to settle in on 2 or 3 But then sometimes it needs to be loving kindness. And sometimes it needs to be something else. So I'm trying to learn what our teachers, and thank you, Marylouise, for teaching us. Thank you.
And it can certainly change from time to time what's needed in this moment. Is there anyone on Zoom who'd like to share?
I find that if I'm working with a particular book in the morning, that's my quiet sitting, trying to stabilize my intention for the day. And I just do that usually with a book. Right now it happens to be Awakening Through Love by McCransky, which I found the meditation practices there extremely powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We all have our reasons, and we all have, it's wonderful that we have so many resources to choose from. There's no right answer, right? Yeah, it's just, what practices are wholesome and onward leading? What's helping me in this moment? And it's really just truly a question that we each need to answer for our own and for ourselves, and sometimes with the help of a teacher's guidance, if I have access to that. There's another Vipassana teacher, Guy Armstrong, says that in mature meditation, self-monitoring occurs. That in addition to this, looking at which kind of meditation should I be doing, that when we're meditating, that just being mindful throughout and noticing the type of energy we're bringing to our meditation, noticing the type of concentration we have. They're qualities that we're aware of, but sometimes we don't think to check in. I actually want to share that another thing that I think is helpful in monitoring what's happening in my meditation is to pay some attention to what's called the 7 factors of awakening. And those sound lofty. They sound as though they're for advanced meditators, but in fact, these are qualities that we all have and qualities that we talk about all the time in our meditation. In fact, the 7 factors of awakening are the factors that I used in that initial meditation that we did tonight. They're mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. And the idea is not that we have to discover or study each one, but sometimes just using them as a touch point so can help us to balance these activating forces of investigation and effort and joy with some of the more quieting forces of calm and concentration and equanimity. I'm going to take just a few minutes to walk through those quickly and just notice how one is connected to another, and that these 7 factors can be a really nice flow in our meditation. As always, mindfulness, sati, is the starting point. But the idea is not to just start with mindfulness and move on to other things, but to think of, Ajahn Tui describes mindfulness, think of it as the railing on a step. And you have to hold on to that railing on the first step, and you continue holding on to it all the way to the top. And in the same way, mindfulness is something that we want to touch into throughout our meditation. Mindfulness as we arrive, mindful of how concentrated we are, mindful of how much energy we have. So keep bringing it back to that mindfulness. And then our practice, our insight meditation practice brings our attention to our awareness into investigation, the second factor, which is basically curiosity about what's arising and what's passing away. So we do inquiries. We're often asking, how we feel in our bodies. What's our sense of our thoughts and our feelings? So this investigation often starts and is really supported by inquiring into what's our body telling us about how I'm responding to whatever's happening in my awareness right now. And that inquiry helps us to be even more interested in things like, how does that breath feel going up and going down? We just wildly curious, and it gets us interested, which gives us energy to do our meditation. So noticing what energy we have in our meditation, how much energy. Is this a day where I'm suffering from sloth and torpor and I'm a little dull and not interested and need to enliven? Or is this one of those days where I can't quiet my mind down and really need to calm? So noticing how much energy is there can really lead to which meditation helps today. What do I need here? Do I need to calm? Do I need to enliven? And what's the nature of the energy? Is my energy just full of curiosity and inquiry and redirecting the mind and being alert? Or do I really need to relax back into more of a receiving energy that allows and accepts, maybe even surrenders to what is? And that with that more balanced energy, we may notice joy. There's the joy of the relief of relaxing and letting go. Sometimes there's just the joy of really being present and letting all that stuff go. And joy is something we don't always ask about. Am I feeling any joy? When you arrive on the cushion, check into the joy, because it enlivens us. It makes us want to return and continue with our meditation. It might even have an energetic feeling in the body once you settle down. I don't know if you've ever had that tingling in the fingers or the aliveness in the breath. Noticing that joy. And when we have that joy and then that desire to stay with this joyful presence, then we turn into the next factor of tranquility. That calm mind, maybe free of distractions. Maybe we can feel more of a flow, like floating on the ocean. And just abiding in this more wholesome state. And it's this calm that is the path into concentration. It's not the trying hard and striving and saying, I'm going to concentrate here. It's the calm that allows us to slide into a more concentrated state. And just mindfully notice that state of concentration. Letting go of some of our thought habits, our self-centered thoughts. And releasing the hindrances so that we can relax into more of a state of deep calm and know and see things as they really are. Because this more stable and collected mind supports deepening insights and wisdom. And this concentration can lead to the seventh factor of equanimity, that embodied sense of ease, balance, okayness, and just letting go of the need to make things different than the way they are, having the capacity to be with it just as it is. So these factors can flow and lead into one another, help us to grow and cultivate our practice. And you may just notice, one or two. How's my energy? What's it like? Am I experiencing any joy? And think about, it's a list, it might be worth learning and checking in your practice. So these wisdom questions to check in our practice, mindfulness, keeping it present throughout. What's happening in my practice and what's happening now? And can I feel the joy of this present moment? Because it'll motivate us to stay in this practice. We can ask, what energy am I bringing to this moment? It's a juicy question, noticing the type of energy and how much. And what benefits have I experienced from my practice? I like to ask that every time I meditate. So this is a cultivation process. We have our seeds, and we do a little weeding, and we add a little water, maybe some fertilizer. But then we need to let the seeds do what seeds do. And we need patience and persistence and more than a little love and devotion. And we create the conditions for growth. And then we can just sit back and see what happens. I'll finish with some wisdom from Pema Chodron, because we all love Pema Chodron. She says, we try so hard to hold on to the teachings and get it, but actually the truth sinks in like rain into very hard earth. The rain is very gentle, and we soften up slowly at our own speed. But when that happens, something has fundamentally changed in us. That hard earth has softened. It doesn't seem to happen by trying to get it or capture it. It happens by letting go. It happens by relaxing your mind. And it happens by the aspiration and the longing to communicate with yourself and others. Each of us finds it in our own way. Thank you for being here tonight. Happy Halloween to y'all.